All right, here we go. I'm making 3 of these in a row, so if you see me wearing this, I am changing my clothes. I'm just making 3 lessons in a day. All right, so don't judge. All right, no scandal. All right, so we're gonna start Cold War II. Chance for you to kind of check in from yesterday's lesson, and then we're also going to cover some new content today. So always fascinating stuff with the Cold War. All right. Let me make sure I'm in the right spot here. All right, so here's a quiz. I'm going to go over it. Feel free to pause the video and try to answer these questions, and then I'll give you the answer afterward. Okay, so here we go. 1, leader of the Soviet Union at the start of the Cold War. You can pause the video there, or you can just answer, but that would be Stalin. 2, leader of the USSR. Oh, did I say? Oh, my word. Okay, 1, leader of the United States, Truman. 2, leader of the USSR at the start of the Cold War. That is Stalin. Wow, it's been a while since I taught. 3, what did the United States keep secret from the Soviets at the Potsdam Conference? That would be the A-bomb, or A-bomb plans. 4, what organization formed in 1945 did the U.S. and the USSR use to spread influence? That would be the United Nations. 5, what kind of government did the President of the United States see as friendly? And I kind of skimmed over this one, but friendly would be anything that would be democratic or support capitalism in terms of its economy. 6, what kind of government did the leader of the Soviet Union see as friendly? That would be anything that supports communism. All right. Communism is an economic, and it's also a governmental system as well. 7, what did the leader of the Soviet Union want to create to protect the USSR from future Western attacks? There's a few ways you could say it. You could say satellite nations. You could say a buffer zone. Either of those work. 8, the U.S. foreign policy of preventing the influence of the Soviet Union was known as what? There's 2 possible answers. You could say containment, or you could also say the Truman Doctrine. Any one of those will work. 9, from 1947 to 1950, what 2 countries did the U.S. provide $400 million in aid to? That would be Greece and Turkey. 10, what were 2 of the 3 reasons there was tension between Stalin and the Allies? 1 is that the Soviets are mad because we didn't help them out in World War II in terms of military aid. Another reason is that we were mad because the Soviets had spies that stole our A-bomb. Or you could say the last final reason is they just disagreed how to rebuild Europe after World War II between the communist system and the democratic system. All right, so check your answers to make sure you're all set with that. Feel free to go back and listen to my answers as well, and don't judge me for my mess up on number 1. It's been a while. All right, so let's transition to Cold War II. Aid, Germany, and alliances. Guys, I'm getting back at this. It's been a while. All right, so our goal of learning target today, students will understand the Marshall Plan. We're looking at Germany after the war, why it's really suspect, and then the formation of alliances, something you might remember from World War I or World War II. All right, take guided notes or watch the video, however you're learning the stuff along with me. That's fine. All right, so let's take a look at Europe after World War II. It's completely decimated. Look at all these primary documents of Hamburg here, or it's just decimated. All the bombing campaigns or the ground combat from World War II. Here's the famous Brandenburg Gate. You just see the buildings are just gutted from the fighting. The Soviets rolled in, or the bombing. So it's crazy. More images, bridges destroyed, roofs collapsed, Germany's in rubble. It's amazing this old Gothic cathedral somehow survived. The rest are just obliterated from World War II. All right, so the Marshall, it should say plan. I'm not sure it's got moved over there, but it's the Marshall, not plot, it's plan. So what is the Marshall Plan? It's by the United States, and it's really the work of Secretary of State George Marshall, who's a former general. During World War II, he transitioned to Secretary of State. And it's a plan to provide aid to all of European nations so they can resist communism. You remember last time the Truman Doctrine, that was the first attempt. That's really giving Greece and Turkey aid. But this is an expansion of that plan. It's basically any country in Europe that wants help, economic aid to resist communism. This is the bigger picture. All right? This is the Cadillac of plans, if you will. So 16 European countries received approximately about $13 billion in U.S. aid, about $178 billion today, and inflated. And if you look at the inflation of money over time. Now, some kids have asked, Mr. Blaine, how in the world do we afford this? At this point in history, we were already in so much national debt from the New Deal government spending. We actually had a lot of revenue, tax revenue as well. America could afford it at this point in time, and we want to make sure that these the countries here in Western Europe didn't succumb to communism. So there's a check down system here. I want you to pay attention to it. One of the first things we're going to do is we have to feed these people from starvation. The farms are destroyed, human capital, humans are dead. Farmers are dead across the continent from the war. They're killed either through the war itself as accidental citizens, or they enlisted in the war and they're dead from that. We've got to feed an entire continent from starvation. So that's one of the first things we do, is we're feeding these countries so that people can survive, the children can survive. Next thing, we're providing equipment. You've got to get cranes, building materials over to Europe to rebuild itself. The Europeans can't simply go to the Home Depot and Lowe's and be like, oh, here's all my supplies. It's decimated from the war. So we're dropping off equipment to rebuild Western Europe. And in order to do that, you've also got to provide economic aid. So we're giving a bunch of money so the European countries can rebuild themselves quickly and not fall to communism. Right? So food, equipment to rebuild the country, and then economic aid to rebuild themselves quickly after World War II. So here's an interesting thing, interesting propaganda from the time. Whatever the weather, we can only reach welfare together. And you see these are the, primarily the flags of the countries that received the aid. And the interesting thing about this wind, as you look at the back here, this is in essence the rudder that kind of guides all of it. That's the United States back there. You see Turkey, you see Greece, United Kingdom, and so on. They're all getting aid. And here's even West Germany after the war. Right. So Marshall Plan, here's $13 billion to help you rebuild after the war. That's one way to rebuild. We start Europe. And really, Europe owes us a debt of gratitude for doing this, because it wasn't for America, you'd see a very different Europe if America wouldn't have stepped in. It's a different world. All right. So let's take a look at what happens in Germany after World War II, post-war Germany. Germany is divided up into 4 sections. You've got the French section down here, of course, next to France. You've got the British section up here, next to Great Britain-ish, and here's the United States down here in this sector. All right. And the other side are the Soviets. Now, why are these 4 in charge of dividing Germany after the war? Because these are the 4 that really fought. Now, France got whooped early on, we know this, but somehow France is still given like a territorial control for the time being. So Great Britain, the Soviets, us, and France were allies in World War II, so we divided Germany out. Think of it as $1, everyone got a quarter. All right. Now, the Soviet Union occupies this area because it's closest to the Soviet Union, which is over here. And they've already got Poland under control and Czechoslovakia under control. So these are different sectors. Now, once it's divided, you have 2 different philosophies. You've got, well, this is wrong here, okay? So this is just wrong. Look at this one. You've got Great Britain, which is a democracy. You've got France, which is a democracy, and the United States, which is a democracy. All right? So they bring democracy to these sides. They bring capitalism. And over here, you've got the Soviet. You've got communism. Communism is used in this area. Right? So let's take a look at what happens with Germany after the war. All right, people can move freely in and out of the city of Berlin for a long time. So what I'm doing here is we're looking at the capital. So the capital itself was also split into 4 sections. Berlin is divided into 4 sections as well. And immediately after the war, people can move in and out of the city. It didn't matter. All right, but a beef is going to start between the Soviets and the United States in Berlin. So the Berliners liked the American currency, the American dollars, because it was more well accepted. It was more stable than the Russian ruble. So people in Berlin were like, we want the American money. Stalin sees this as a threat, that people like the Americans more than the Soviets, that their system's better than his. It's an ego thing. So over the issue of currency, the US-backed dollars, the US money that's being used in Berlin, Germany, Stalin's like, we're shutting the city down. So that you see this image here, here's Berlin, and it's shut down. Now the reason why he could do this is, let me go take you back 1 slide. Berlin, the capital, is located in the Soviet area. So this portion of the country controlled by the Soviets, the capital is located in. So he locks the city down. internally. All right, so Stalin closes the highways, he closes the rail. Nothing gets out of the city in 1948. The people of Berlin are locked down, and no supplies are going to come in. Now, what you have to understand about the scenario is the Americans, the British, and the French are responsible for the well-being of the citizens in that portion of Berlin. So we're in charge of them, but we can't get them supplies. They need food, they need heat, they need the basic necessities of life to survive because the city is in ruin. And when Stalin locks them up, there's no way the people of Berlin are going to survive. He's going to starve them to death. So no food or fuel can reach Berlin. It's got about 2.1 million residents who survived World War II, and they have enough food to last about 5 weeks. And Stalin's just locking the country down until they accept his form of currency. So people are going to starve over the issue of currency. He locks the country down. So the Americans, being pretty smart people, they locked the highways down, the roads, they locked the rail down, but they didn't lock the sky down. So here's what America's going to do, and it's a genius moment in American history. We do have this thing called the Berlin Airlift, right? So we're going to bring supplies to the people of Berlin via the air. We're going to fly supplies from our sectors, all right? So you see this correctly. Here's the British sector, the French sector, and the American sector. We're going to fly in supplies to the 2.1 million people who are locked down in eastern, so the western portion of Berlin here, West Berlin. We're going to drop the supplies off. For 327 days, planes take off from American, British, and French-controlled areas, mostly under the, America is overseeing all this because we're the ones doing it. They're flying for consecutive days, 327 days, over 277 total flights, and they're bringing 2.3 million tons of food, fuel, medicine, and supplies to the people of West Berlin. Right? So if you're Stalin, how do you stop it? You can't. He didn't say we couldn't fly, so the Americans fly. And if he tries to shoot down American planes bringing supplies, you have the dawn of World War III at that point. So we call his bluff. We simply outsmart him, and we drop hundreds and hundreds of tons of food into Berlin, keeping the people alive. And they are eternally indebted to us, the Americans, for doing this. So almost a year later, so realize it's been defeated in this first little beef war started by Stalin, and he lifts the blockade. People of Germany can start, of the capital of Berlin, can start moving into that country again, and they're no longer going to starve to death by the Soviets. All right, so here's some images of the American, the Berlin airlift, the supplies being put into the bays of airplanes. And there's this iconic image here of the children of West Berlin and the American bombers carrying supplies. And what we did is early on, we dropped supplies down via parachutes. We just didn't know how the Soviets would respond. So we were dropping supplies via parachutes to the people, and they just went and packed the supplies. And eventually we got to the point where we could land the planes and dump the supplies off because we realized the Soviets weren't going to shoot the American planes down. Okay. So milk, the new weapon of democracy. All right. Here's an interesting one there. Here's Stalin sitting in Berlin fictitiously with his blunderbuss rifle, and the Americans just dropping off, the storks dropping off supplies of food. Right? So we won. Stalin got a little triggered from all of this. He was embarrassed by the Americans. Right? 1-0. American definitely outsmarted the Soviet Union in this scenario here. All right, so, all right, let's talk about some alliances real quick. So that was the Berlin airlift. Now let's shift our attention to alliances again. All right, so after this, you start to see a real movement towards alliances for balances of power. The United States establishes this thing called NATO, and I'd say the United States, it's other countries working with us as well, but NATO is, make sure you understand it, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's an organization, it's a treaty, it's a military league. So it's designed to stop any kind of Soviet aggression. Right? And it's an agreement that if one democratic country is attacked by a Soviet or communist country, an attack against one is an attack against all. I mean, all these Americans and pro-democratic countries would fight against the resistance. That's what NATO is. It's still around even this day. It's this military alliance between us and these countries in Western Europe. All right, we have this agreement. If one gets attacked, we will defend those countries against aggression. So NATO's first, and then a few years later, the Soviets are like, oh my word, we are badly outnumbered. So the Soviets counter with this thing called the Warsaw Pact. Warsaw is from Poland. So in 1955, it's basically the Soviet version of NATO, where it's a military alliance. So if one of these Soviet communist-style countries gets attacked from a democratic country, all these Soviet-backed countries will protect each other. So both sides are like, if you attack us, we will attack you with force. Sounds a little bit like World War I, doesn't it? It's like, oh, there's this disastrous scenario again of alliances. What if one country gets attacked? They all have to go and protect each other. Luckily, it turned out okay in this scenario. Right? So, pretty crazy. Right? So, pretty crazy. Those are the alliances. Warsaw Pact is going to dissolve in 1991, and we still are part of NATO. You can just stay a military alliance with us and Western powers of Europe. Right? And then it's been picking up heat. Like I said, some people think we're in a Cold War for a second time. Americans are training, even in Western Europe this day, against Russian aggression. Russians have moved their forces close to Estonia. They're in the Baltic. America is not backing down, even right now. It's a show of force against Russian aggression. There's still that tension there. Right? So now the thing with alliances, nothing could go wrong, right? Remember World War I, all it took was that teenager to start World War I, and they all had to go in alliance to all protect each other. That same kind of like powder keg once again here. Something goes wrong, they're all going to war again. All right, so let's take a look at the crisis in Berlin once again. I'm moving forward history a little bit here, so hang with me. All right, so we're in Berlin. It's the 1960s. I jumped ahead a lot here, but I want to talk about what happens. The second scenario, Berlin gets locked down. This is where you start to see the actual construction of the Berlin Wall, constructed in 1961. The leader of the Soviet Union at this time is Khrushchev. He's Stalin's replacement. He immediately begins the orders of the construction of the Berlin Wall. And it's constructed quickly, in a single night, quickly built in a single night. Sometimes it's barbed wire, sometimes it's these actual cinder blocks here, but they lock the people of Berlin down. Right? And when this is happening, the people of Berlin, who have homes in different areas of the city, thousands flee. They run across to the other side. When they run across, they're running to the American-controlled side because that's your best chance to survive. People don't like the Soviets' view of East Berlin. And it divides families. So if you didn't make that jump across that wall that night, and you had family that was living in East Berlin, and you lived in West Berlin, you never saw them again for the most part. You were divided down the city, all right? And when I say that, what I want you to understand is, imagine this. Imagine my hand as being Berlin, and the wall is dividing right down the line. If this portion here was the American-controlled side of West Berlin, the Soviets also built around this area too. So you were completely encapsulated. You were locked down into this area, and you couldn't really leave. So you're just locked down. That's what's so dangerous about this, right? And that's what the Soviets built. Berlin is locked down via the Berlin Wall, and eventually it's going to come crashing down in 1990. But for almost 30 years, this wall divided the country, and the people of West Berlin were under, this is locked down from the Soviets, right? And this construction over time got more and more elaborate. If you wanted to leave, it was almost impossible to do so. So here's the first line, all right? And they put these rounded edges in the wall here so that if you try to get to the top, the rounded edges prevent you from getting a grip and pulling yourself up. And even if you could scale to one side, you have these massive areas where you have minefields, these watchtowers with machine gun turrets. It's just crazy. And my bad, actually, we should go over here first, because look at this. If you got over the first wall, this is barbed wire. It prevented you from going over the top. And if you got over the top here, you had to run through these different mazes. And there was just soldiers guarding here, watchtowers here, and this would prevent you from over the last edge from getting over there. It's just a wild construction. And then you in our own West Michigan area, we have a chunk of this. The Berlin Wall is located at in the Gerald R. Ford Museum. You get a chance to see it, and you can see the rounded tops of the portion of the wall. All right, it's there. People were pretty creative about escaping. There are some stories that people oftentimes would try to swim across different channels. One guy stole a tank one time and tried to run a tank through it. And some person actually tried to escape via a hot air balloon one time as well. And there were some successes. Some people say that in its early construction, people jumped from buildings that were tall enough over the wall to freedom. But unfortunately, at this point in history, the people of Berlin, of West Berlin, are just locked down from the Soviets. All right, that was a lot. Make sure you review your notes. If you have questions, as always, send me an email. I'm happy to work through you as well. All right, so, all right, that's it. 2 lessons down, 1 lesson to go.